The afternoon sun was blazing down on the city streets, casting long shadows as people bustled about, lost in their own worlds. Among them was Marcus, a tall, well-dressed man with a quiet confidence about him. His sharp features and warm smile turned heads wherever he went, but today, his charm wasn't what caught people's attention. It was the woman following him, her voice rising with anger, her words sharp as knives. She was a whirlwind of fury, a middle-aged woman with wild, unkempt blonde hair and eyes that burned with something deeper than just annoyance. Her words came out in a relentless stream of curses, loud enough for everyone around to hear. Some people stopped to watch, others awkwardly pretended not to notice, but the tension in the air was undeniable. Marcus, on the other hand, didn't react the way most people would. He didn't shout back. He didn't curse. He didn't even pick up his pace. He simply walked, shoulders squared, his face calm, but his jaw tight. It was clear that he had been dealing with this for a while. The woman's insults weren't just random outbursts. They were pointed, cruel, and personal. And yet, Marcus kept his cool. "Come on, say something," she yelled, throwing her arms up as if she was trying to drag a reaction out of him. "What? You think you're too good to answer me? You think you're better than me?" He glanced at her, his dark eyes steady, unreadable. "I think you should calm down," he said simply. That only made her angrier. She stepped closer, invading his space, her face twisted with rage. "Oh, you'd love that, wouldn't you? For me to just shut up and go away? People like you always think you can just ignore the rest of us." People nearby shifted uncomfortably. A few pulled out their phones, sensing that this was one of those moments that might just go viral. Still, Marcus didn't bite. He didn't match her anger with anger. He didn't give her the fight she so desperately wanted. And then, just when it seemed like she was about to push him over the edge, fate stepped in. A sharp cry rang out, a screech of tires, a loud, heart-stopping crash. Everything seemed to slow down. The woman's rage vanished in an instant, replaced by shock. Her eyes widened as she turned to see what had just happened. And Marcus. For the first time that day, his expression changed. Because what happened next was something neither of them saw coming, and it would change everything. But before we get to that, let's rewind for a second. Who was this woman? Why was she so determined to make Marcus's life miserable? And most importantly, what was the price she was about to pay? Keep watching, because this story is just getting started. The street was frozen in a moment of shock. People gasped, some rushed forward, others stood frozen, unsure of what to do. The sound of the crash still echoed in the air, metal against metal, glass shattering. Marcus turned slowly, his calm composure finally shifting, his eyes scanning the scene. Just a few feet away, a car had slammed into the side of a lamppost. The front end was crumpled, smoke curling from under the hood. The driver, a man in his early 40s, suit jacket thrown over the passenger seat, stumbled out, looking dazed. A woman across the street screamed, her hands flying to her mouth. And then something strange happened. The woman who had been following Marcus, the one who had been cursing him all this time, suddenly went silent. Her face, flushed red with anger just moments ago, drained of color. Her hands, which had been moving wildly in frustration, now trembled at her sides. Marcus noticed it right away, the way her body stiffened, the way her breath caught in her throat. He turned to follow her gaze. That's when he saw it. Lying on the pavement, just a few feet from where the car had crashed, was a young girl. She wasn't moving. A small bicycle lay crumpled beside her, its front wheels still spinning. The woman gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Oh my God." Marcus didn't hesitate. In a few quick strides, he was by the child's side. People were already dialing 911, voices frantic, footsteps rushing. He knelt down, carefully checking her breathing. She was unconscious but alive. A small cut on her forehead leaked a thin line of blood. The woman was still standing there, frozen, her face twisted in disbelief. Marcus finally looked up at her, his voice steady but firm. "Do you know her?" She blinked, as if waking from a dream. Then slowly she nodded. Marcus didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The weight of the moment settled heavily between them. The same woman who had spent the last 15 minutes cursing him, chasing him down the street, trying to tear him down with her words, was now standing in shock, staring at the injured child. And it didn't take long to put the pieces together. The woman suddenly grabbed the phone from Marcus's hand. "Derek, stop this," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "I don't know what you think is happening, but I went to Marcus because I needed answers, because I was tired of believing your lies." Derek's breath hitched on the other end. Then suddenly, his tone changed. Softer now, almost pleading. "I was trying to protect you," he said. "You and Emma. I told you not to trust him." The woman's hands tightened around the phone. "You don't get to say that. You left us. You lied to me for years, made me think Marcus was the enemy when the truth is, it was always you." Her voice cracked, but she didn't back down. "I see that now." Marcus could hear Derek breathing through the line. It was uneven, unsteady. Then finally he spoke again, barely above a whisper. "You don't understand." Marcus frowned. Understand what? There was another pause. Then Derek muttered something under his breath, something Marcus almost didn't catch. But when the words sank in, his entire body went rigid. "She was never supposed to be in the street," Derek said. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." A heavy silence filled the air. The woman's face twisted in confusion. "What are you saying?" she demanded. "Are you saying you—" Derek exhaled shakily. "I only wanted to scare you," he admitted, "to remind you that you needed me. I didn't think she'd run out like that. I swear." Marcus felt a slow, burning anger rise in his chest. "You were there." Derek didn't answer right away. When he finally did, his voice was barely audible. "I never left." The woman gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Marcus's mind raced. The accident, Emma in the street, the driver swearing she came out of nowhere. Was it possible? Had Derek been watching, waiting, manipulating everything from the shadows? Marcus clenched his fists, his voice deadly calm. "Where are you now?" The line clicked. Derek was gone. Marcus and the woman sat frozen, the weight of what they had just heard settling between them. The past wasn't just haunting them anymore. It was right there, breathing down their necks. Because 2 days later, when Marcus least expected it, the past came knocking. Marcus wasn't expecting anything unusual when he stepped into his favorite coffee shop that morning. The bell of the door chimed softly as he walked in, the rich scent of roasted beans filling the air. He ordered his usual, black coffee, no sugar, and found a seat by the window, watching the city move outside. It had been 2 days since the accident, but the images were still fresh in his mind. The crash, the little girl on the pavement, the look in her mother's eyes. He didn't even know why it stuck with him so much. Maybe it was the way everything had shifted in an instant, how one moment of anger had turned into something much more complicated. He took a slow sip of coffee, trying to shake the thoughts. But then something made him pause. A figure had just walked in, hesitant, looking around as if searching for someone. It took him a second to recognize her. Emma's mother. Her hair was pulled back this time, her face pale, dark circles under her eyes. She was dressed simply, jeans, a sweater, but there was something about her posture that made her seem smaller than before, less aggressive, more uncertain. Marcus exhaled and turned back toward his coffee, not sure if she had seen him. But then he heard her voice. "Hey." It wasn't loud, wasn't demanding. It was almost quiet. Marcus looked up. She was standing there, her hands gripping the strap of her purse, shifting her weight like she wasn't sure if she should stay or run. He didn't say anything at first, just studied her. This was the same woman who had screamed at him in the street, who had chased him down, throwing insults like daggers. And yet, now, standing here, she looked like a completely different person. She cleared her throat. Can I sit? Marcus considered it for a moment, then gestured to the chair across from him. She hesitated, then slowly pulled it out and sat down. For a few seconds, there was silence. She didn't seem to know where to start, and Marcus wasn't about to make it easy for her. Finally, she exhaled sharply. Look, She stopped, pressed her lips together, then tried again. I just wanted to say. She trailed off, rubbing her hands together, eyes flickering to the window. Emma's okay. Marcus nodded. Good to hear. Another pause. She had a concussion, she continued, as if forcing herself to fill the space between them. A few scrapes, but nothing too serious. The doctor said she was lucky. Her voice faltered on the last word, but she wasn't sure if she even believed it. Marcus just watched her. He could tell there was more. She swallowed hard, tapping her fingers against the table. I saw you, she finally admitted, her voice quieter now. I saw you helping her. When I was just standing there like a damn idiot. Her fingers curled into fists before she let them go again. I should have, I don't know, moved faster, done something, but I couldn't. She shook her head, frustrated with herself. Marcus leaned back, arms crossed, shocked as that to people. She let out a short, bitter laugh. Yeah, well, maybe. Or maybe I just. She trailed off, staring at the table. Her throat worked like she was swallowing back something heavy. Marcus waited. When she finally spoke again, her voice was raw. I was angry, she admitted. I am angry. All the time. At everything. At people I don't even know. She blinked quickly, shaking her head. I don't even know why I went after you that day. She clenched her jaw. I was looking for someone to blame. Marcus didn't respond right away. He let her words sit between them, heavy and real. He had felt it before. That kind of anger, the kind that had no real direction, just burning, looking for something to land on. Finally, he set his coffee down. And now, he asked. She met his gaze for the first time since she sat down. Now, I don't know, she admitted. But I do know that if you hadn't been there, her voice caught, and she had to take a breath. Emma might not have made it. Marcus nodded slowly, watching her carefully. The tension wasn't gone. The past wasn't erased, but something was shifting. Something was about to change. And neither of them knew just how much. Marcus studied her face, searching for something, he wasn't sure what. Maybe sincerity, maybe regret. Maybe a sign that this conversation was leading somewhere real. The woman, Emma's mother, kept her eyes on the table, her fingers restless, like she was still deciding whether she had the courage to finish what she had started. Then, just when Marcus thought she might get up and walk away, she whispered, "There's something else." The way she said it made his stomach tighten. He stayed silent, waiting. She inhaled sharply, then finally lifted her eyes to meet his. That day, before the accident, her voice wavered, but she forced herself to continue. I wasn't just mad at you. I was following you. Marcus frowned. Yeah, I noticed. No, she shook her head. I mean, I was following you on purpose. I knew who you were. His entire body went still. She exhaled, rubbing her temples, clearly wrestling with something heavy. Emma's father, my ex, he told me about you. She looked at Marcus carefully, watching for a reaction. Said you were the reason his life fell apart. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Who's your ex? She swallowed, as if the name itself was hard to say. Derek. The name hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He knew exactly who she was talking about. Derek was a former co-worker, no, more than that. He was a man Marcus had trusted once. A man who had made his own choices, his own mistakes, but had blamed Marcus when everything crashed down around him. And now sitting across from him was the woman Derek had left behind, the woman he had filled with poison, with stories that twisted the truth. Marcus let out a slow breath, leaning back in his chair. So that's why you came after me, he said, piecing it together. You thought I was the reason your life turned to hell. She nodded, her jaw tightening. I believed him. He said you ruined his career, that you took everything from him. Her hands clenched into fists on the table, and I had so much anger already. I didn't even question it. She let out a dry, humorless laugh. I just needed someone to blame. And then I saw you that day, walking like you didn't have a care in the world, and I lost it. Marcus sighed, running a hand over his face. He should have seen it coming. Derek had always been good at twisting the truth, at making himself the victim, but it still stung. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the cafe hummed around them, clinking cups, quiet conversations, the whir of the espresso machine. Then Marcus spoke, his voice steady. Derek got himself fired, he said. Not me. She exhaled sharply. I know that now. Marcus watched her carefully. And what do you want from me? She opened her mouth, hesitated, then finally said, I don't know. She looked down at her hands, shaking her head. Maybe nothing. Maybe just, she let out a breath. Maybe I just needed to admit I was wrong. Marcus wasn't sure if he believed her. Not yet. But then, before he could decide what to say, his phone buzzed. He glanced down, expecting it to be something unimportant. But when he saw the name on the screen, his entire body tensed. Derek. As if the past wasn't quite finished with him yet. Marcus stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. The name, Derek, flashed like a warning, a ghost from the past, refusing to stay buried. He hadn't spoken to him in over a year, not since everything had gone down. Not since Derek had blamed him for losing everything. The woman across from him, Derek's ex, noticed the shift in his expression. Who is it? She asked, though something in her tone said she already knew. Marcus let the phone ring a few more times before finally answering. Derek, he said flatly. There was a pause on the other end, as if Derek hadn't expected him to pick up. Then came the voice, low, edged with something Marcus couldn't quite place. We need to talk. Marcus didn't respond right away. He glanced up at the woman, who was watching him closely. Why now? He asked. Derek exhaled. Because I know she's there with you. Marcus felt his grip on the phone tighten. How do you know that? There was a brief silence, then Derek's voice dropped lower. Because I've been watching. A chill crept down Marcus's spine. His eyes flickered toward the window, scanning the street outside. The usual city life moved on, people walking, cars passing. But now, everything felt different. He couldn't see Derek, but that didn't mean he wasn't out there. The woman must have heard Derek's words through the phone because her face went pale. No, she whispered, shaking her head. He wouldn't. Marcus kept his voice steady. You've been watching. Why? Derek chuckled softly, but there was no humor in it. Because I wanted to see if she'd do it, he said. If she'd actually go to you. If she'd betray me. Marcus exhaled sharply. She didn't betray you, Derek. You did that to yourself. There was a pause, then Derek's voice turned sharp. You always thought you were better than me, didn't you? Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. Derek had always been like this, twisting reality, making himself the victim. This wasn't just any child. This was her child. Marcus turned back to the girl, his mind racing. She was young, maybe 7, maybe 8. Her light brown curls spread across the pavement, her tiny fingers curled slightly, as if she'd been gripping the handlebars tight before the crash. The driver of the car was now standing nearby, his hands on his head, eyes wide with panic. She came out of nowhere, he muttered. I didn't see her. Oh God, I didn't see her. A siren wailed in the distance. Help was coming. Marcus exhaled slowly, steadying himself. He had no idea how the girl had ended up in the street, no idea if she had run out too fast, if the driver was reckless, or if something else had happened. But in that moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was that she was still breathing. What mattered was that she needed help. The woman finally moved, stepping forward hesitantly, her hands shaking. Her entire body seemed to shrink, the fire in her voice gone. The anger, the rage, it had all been replaced by something else. Something raw, something real. She knelt beside Marcus, her breath ragged. Is she? She's alive, Marcus said, his voice softer now. But she needs medical attention. Tears welled up in the woman's eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. I didn't. She struggled to find the words. She looked at Marcus then, really looked at him, as if seeing him for the first time. The sirens grew louder, flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the glass windows of nearby buildings. The crowd shifted, some stepping back, others whispering. But Marcus didn't look away from the woman. Because now the story had changed. This wasn't just about some random woman